Welcome back to Taiwan Outlook. We are very honored to have Dr. Joseph Wu, Taiwan's former ambassador to the United States, in our studio today. Dr. Wu, you are ambassador to the United States for almost 15 months. And what's the most rewarding part of your job there?
Well, I think the most rewarding part of my job is that I get to see the results of my hard work in Washington, D.C. One of the things I did with lots of effort is to visit different places in the United States, because the United States is a huge country, and there are important places everywhere. And I had made 31 out-of-town trips to make speeches, to make contacts with politicians, or to talk to the students on campuses, things like this. And some of the people may not understand about Taiwan. They may not understand the meaning of Taiwan to the United States or the importance of Taiwan to that great country. But after my speech, I get to see those people who started to understand and who started to like Taiwan much more than before I gave them the talk. And therefore, you can see the people smile, and people came and greeted me, and they say that they understand much more now. They support Taiwan from now on. Things like that. So you get to see the results of the hard work. And one of the things that I feel very proud of when I was serving in Washington, D.C. is that the overseas Taiwanese or the overseas Chinese who are from Taiwan are very divided. The expatriate community are very divided. They are either pan-green or pan-blue. There's very few people in the middle. And as you can see, it's very difficult for Taiwan's diplomats to handle that kind of situation. And when I arrived in Washington, D.C. Last April, I sensed that some of the people over there might not give me the full support. But I wasn't discouraged by that. I continued to engage them, continued to talk to them, and participated in their activities. And at the very end, both camps supported me. And even though they toasted the farewell party separately, but both camps gave me a very warm reception in my farewell party, and that was a very touching moment. And when I was leaving Washington, D.C., one of those, what we call the pan-blue supporters, a very senior figure, almost 90 years old, he came to the airport to see me off, and that was a very touching moment. So you can see that if I work hard enough,
great job.
I get to be supported by our own people, no matter whether they are green or blue.
But one constraint on the relationship between Taiwan and the U.S. is that we don't have official diplomatic ties between these two countries. So there must be some constraints on your activities, on your functioning in this area. So what's the most frustrating part of your job?
Well, I should say that the most frustrating part comes from China factor. Even though we don't have a full diplomatic relations with the United States, but we can always turn things around to make things happen. For example, I'm not allowed to go into the State Department, but we can always meet in a hotel, a special meeting room in a restaurant or a hotel near the State Department. And I don't get a chance to enter the White House as Taiwan's representative, but we can always meet with White House officials, very senior level White House officials, in a club or in a restaurant nearby for lunch or for dinner, for other occasions. And therefore, difficulties of that part can be overcome. And I was able to go to different government agencies without any problem. And sometimes I was even welcomed to by the minister himself to their government agency, and I was called ambassador. So that was a very rewarding moment. And China comes into the picture in a very unpleasant way. Sometimes I get invited by some organizations to participate in some events. The Chinese would launch protests to make sure that my name is deleted. Just to give you an example, after I arrived in Washington, D.C., I was invited by Asia Foundation for their annual Ambassadors Night. But then the Chinese protested, and the Asia Foundation had to withdraw their invitation for me. And things like this just continue to happen. For example, the Atlantic Council also has its annual gala, and Taiwan Embassy is a contributor, but Taiwan's embassy's name, the TECRO, is not on the list, and therefore unpleasant things like this can happen, and that is always because of China.
You are scholar turned diplomat, scholar turned official, and now you are, a politician or official turned scholar.
Displaced politician.
Well, the thing is, there's a gap between theory and practice. What's your view on the academic world and the diplomatic world?
Well, I think the two things are mutually complementary. I still remember the days before I entered the government in 2002. I taught students about decision making. And I told students that this is what's supposed to happen in the government decision-making process. But I was very shallow. I understand that I don't know anything about the policy-making process, about how decisions were made. And then I got this experience of government decisions concerning some certain things. And I have a lot more confidence right now when I write something or say something about a key decision that is being made. I feel much more confident right now. And since I do research on the cross-strait relations and on Taiwan-US relations or triangular relations, I hope that some of the things I learned in the past few years, either in the presidential office or Mainland Affairs Council or Taiwan's representative office in Washington, D.C., can enrich my research and, in turn, to make a contribution to the academic circle.
We always say that foreign policy stops at the edge of water. There should be no partisan views about Taiwan's foreign policy or even security policies. But the thing is, in Taiwan, we do have a very divided society, and people have different views about the threat perception and so on. Is that a burden for Taiwan that we had to overcome?
Yes, indeed. That is one very difficult area that Taiwan has to overcome. When I was serving in Washington, D.C., I already made a commitment to myself that it has to stop at the water's edge. And therefore, when I was in Washington, D.C., I don't comment on domestic politics. And I don't criticize any political figure. I don't criticize the opposition party at all. And that is the honesty and integrity of the position. And I hope that our diplomats in Washington, D.C. or anywhere else should follow that kind of principle. And I think foreign policy should be bipartisan, especially when Taiwan is facing such a difficult situation of China suffocating us internationally. And I certainly hope that the current government can be more open-minded in thinking about the role the opposition, the DPP, used to be the ruling party, now the opposition, how the opposition can play in Taiwan's diplomacy, or the opposition and their role can play in deepen the strategic depth of Taiwan's dealing with China or dealing with other countries. If we don't do that, we continue to touch upon those areas that makes the opposition right this moment very sensitive, very angry, and that is not going to be good for the country.
You were the chairperson of the Mainland Affairs Council, and you were also our ambassador to the United States. So you work in two different areas, and foreign policy and cross-strait policy. Now the current government argues that the cross-strait policy is more important than foreign policies. What's your view on the balance between the two?
Well, if the new government is saying that there has to be a balance, I would agree. And when I was in the Mainland Affairs Council, I don't say that the Mainland Affairs Council is superior than our foreign policy. I have to think that the foreign policy is also awfully important for Taiwan. And I personally had to take overseas trip to make sure that other friends, international friends, understand our cross-strait policy, because that's mutually complementary. And when I was in Washington, D.C., I continued to encounter the cross-strait issues. And therefore, you can see that cross-strait issue is very important in our pursuit of diplomatic relations, of relations with other countries, even with those countries who do not have diplomatic relations with Taiwan. But saying that cross-strait relations is more important than our foreign policy is something that I will never be able to accept. In fact, those two things should be mutually complementary. And we should think about how our diplomatic relations can contribute to our pursuit of better relations with China as well. And I think one of the keys we have to face is that China is the country that is being suffocating Taiwan internationally, and that is the country that is being threatening Taiwan militarily, and that is the country that we have to reckon with. And in order to be able to reckon with China, we have to have a lot of friends, and these friends are our buffer. These friends are a barrier to China's encroaching to our sovereignty, and of course, pursuing more relations with other countries. In this sense, it's got to be awfully important for a small country like Taiwan.
But finally, China factor is always a very important factor in determining Taiwan's economic future, political future, and diplomatic future. So some people argue that why don't we talk to China and solve the problem, fix all the problems?
If China is open-minded on this issue, and if China is willing to listen to the Taiwan people and let the Taiwan people determine Taiwan's own future, that should be a perfect solution. But I think if we are betting our future on the uncertain, unpredictable China's goodwill, that is going to place our own future in the hands of a devil as well. So we have to be very careful on this. For one very simple example of how China is handling the cross-strait relations at this moment. For example, they are going to send 2 panda bears to Taiwan. Personally, I don't have any objection over the panda bears. But what the Chinese policy in dealing with the panda bear transfer to Taiwan is that this is a domestic trade. They're sending from one province to another. And if we accept the panda bears, we are accepting that Taiwan is part of the PRC. We are just one province of China. And people are saying that, oh, pandas harmless, let's have them. But to me, who has been dealing with cross-strait policies for more than 3 years, I'm concerned about that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wu, for coming to our program and for your
welcome.
efforts in promoting Taiwan's relations with the U.S.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for watching Taiwan Outlook, and see you next time.